666.
Congratulations to the 1.8 billion Muslims in the world on the occasion of Islamic New Year, which was observed in Saudi Arabia this Wednesday, July 19th. So yesterday, as we record in a week, uh, in the Islamic or Hijri calendar, our July 19th is the first day of the month of Muharram in the Islamic year of 1445. So I thought it would be appropriate to do a one big thing on the Islamic calendar because and it's funny, Abdul Rahman, you mentioned them. I've always been impressed with how smoothly and easily our Muslim friends manage to balance two calendars. I have, on my watch here, I have the Muslim, day and date, and it's on my phone. But I never refer to it. It's just sort of there. So I have Muharram 2, 1445 for today. But, for someone in say someone who is a Muslim, um, the operation is not so simple. I think they don't even think about it, but it's quite complex. So anyway, it's a shout out to Islamic New Year and a little info on the Hijri calendar. Unlike the Gregorian calendar, some of you may know this, so this may be very 101 elementary. The Gregorian calendar, which is based on the Earth's movement around the sun, basically a steady 365 days. The Hijri calendar is based on the moon. By the way, many, 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 ancient civilizations were based, their calendars were based on the moon. I mean, the Babylonians, the Jews, the Greeks, Egyptians, Aztecs, Incas, Hindus. So, that's sort of standard issue historically. But so the new moon, every new moon marks the beginning of each of the 12 lunar months, and a full year amounts to 354 or 355 days. So the Hijri calendar is essentially 10 or 11 days shorter than the Gregorian calendar. So the calendars don't align. For you and I, it doesn't matter. We go by the Gregorian. Also, year one in the Hijri calendar begins with the year 622 of the Common Era and the Gregorian calendar. So in that year, the Prophet Muhammad and the then existing Muslim community migrated from Mecca to Medina. So this hijra or migration, according to the Caliph Umar, who was the second caliph, I believe, but also Muhammad's father-in-law, quote, separated truth from falsehood. So let it become the epic of the era, unquote. So the Hijri year one is our 622. 2023, this year for us, is Hijri year 1445. But again, that to go back to the beginning, that's not what impresses me most. All of the Muslims' faith rituals are based on the Hijri calendar. So Ramadan, Hajj, the Eids, the Prophet's birth, etc., not only move through the lunar year, but also obviously don't align with the Gregorian calendar that governs, for almost all the Muslims we know, their professional lives. So you have this, construct where you've got when you're organizational. So, is Gregorian, but your religious and family in many ways is Hijri. So this year, for example, Eid al-Adha, which occurred, which marks the end of the Hajj. It was observed starting on June 28th. It won't be on June 28th again for 30 years. I mean, all these important dates cycle through the year. You have to adapt. You have to change. They don't, the Gregorian calendar doesn't accommodate them. They just move through the year. So the corollary for us would be that our work and family was Gregorian, but all our religious observations, Easter, Lent, Advent, Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever, were on a separate schedule. It changed significantly each year. So I just think this is impressive. And I wanted to give a shout out to all our extraordinarily capable Muslim friends, especially in professional world, who are able to adapt and able to move, able to accommodate, their Gregorian life with their Hijri life. So again, on the occasion of Islamic New Year, I want to recognize all these incredibly competent Muslims. I know it looks easy. I don't think it's easy at all. I hope I haven't offended Muslims everywhere with this very basic overview. But again, on the occasion of Islamic New Year, here's a shout out to all you really, Muslims, keeping all this aligned and straight.
Yes. Happy New Year. That was a good one, Richard. I didn't know any of that. I also didn't know what your one big thing was this week in advance. So that was actually kind of cool. And as I asked you, I was like, because typically we talk a little bit about it and we just so that we kind of know what's going to happen. I didn't know. And I was like, you know what? It was a strange week. So I was like, oh, you know what? I'm going in. I don't know anything and actually learned a few things there, Richard. So that's really good. I just wanted to second the point that you made about how easily, or sorry, how easy it seems to keep this straight for followers of Islam, these two calendars that are completely different. And yet it seems so natural that it's never like when you're talking to them, they're never sort of doing a calculation in front of you. It just sort of seems like it comes naturally. Like you said, I know it's not that easy. I can't even keep my own calendar straight, Richard. I have two. And I can't get those two straight. So, and that's just one type of calendar, the Gregorian calendar. So that is amazing, Richard.
What's the date of Easter next year, 2024?
I don't know. And Richard, we joked about this, right? July 4th it's July 4th. That's the date, but it's going to happen occasionally on a Tuesday. And you're like, well, this is no good. Christmas is always on the 25th. There's certain things that we know. And then there's some things like Easter changes and Thanksgiving. Does that change?
Yeah, 20, it does.
26, right? Yeah. Well, yeah.
It's like something like the third Thursday in November, Thanksgiving, Easter, same thing, but it essentially moves by a day, and I always know Easter because it's near my birthday. But yeah, that's an example. I can't even keep track of that. Imagine trying to keep it on a religious holiday that jumps 10 or 11 days a year.
Yeah. And thank goodness for modern calendar apps, by the way, that have these things built into them so that it just says Easter and you're like, oh, cool. And some of my calendars actually have some other things and you can actually get these plugins where like, you're like, oh, give me every Washington Capitals home game, put into the calendar, which is delightful. But yes, shout out. That's awesome. But of course, Richard, then you kind of regret doing that. It's hard to unadd those things. And you're like, oh, I don't really care about this anymore.
My calendar is a friggin' mess.
I did that with Chelsea's games and I was like, I'm not going to get to watch most of these games, but it's there.
It just makes you feel bad, right?
It does. Yeah, it does.